بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وعلى um, just before we get started with the book, there was the two PDFs that I sent out last time. I don't know if either of you got a chance to take a look at that, but yeah, so there's the two books, الميسرات لإدراك الأسانيد والرواة. And so this focuses on just being able to, some of the more common narrators, and it's more detailed in that regard. Whereas you have the other one, معرفة رواة المكثرين, where he starts with the Sahaba that narrate the most hadith, and then he talks about their most famous students and their most famous students. And if you go to the end of the book, he has essentially a chart of all of the Sahaba, and then going through to their students. And so he kind of basically takes he talks about the most common chains, gives a brief bio of those narrators, and then he also talks about the idea of the strongest narrator from a particular Sahabi or particular, I guess you could say a particular sheikh, right? Whether it's from the Sahaba or the Tabi'in or whatnot. So who is the strongest person from Abu Hurairah? Who is the strongest person from Jabir? Who is the strongest person from this? So he also goes into that idea. We're not going to be focusing on that part, but I do want us to go through the biographies of the Sahaba and some of the most famous narrators. So we're going to start off over here in you have over here in this in Muyassirat, he has it on page 14, right? Ashabul Uluf. So these are the 7 Sahaba who narrated more than 1,000 hadith. And he talks about where this count comes from. Al-Muyassirat. So he talks about that. So I want to start off by going through these 7. It's 16 of the PDF, 14 of the book. So starting off with these 7 Sahaba, then you have from them, you have those, then you have their 6 madars that we'll talk about after we finish going through the bios of these 7, then those 6 madars, and then we'll talk about there's 5 teachers of Imam Tirmidhi that he most commonly narrates from, and so we'll try to talk about those after that, inshallah. But these, at least the Sahaba, I'm gonna task you guys with preparing that, just so you guys get an idea of how the different works on the biographies of Sahaba work. So there's three books. There's Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba by Ibn Hajar. I'll text the name. Um, and then you have Al-Isti'ab by Ibn Abd al-Barr. Just texting on the group as well, just so you have it. And then you have Ustul Ghaba by Ibn al-Athir. These are the three most famous works on to reference the biographies of the Sahaba. You have other, you have different lectures and you have different things on that. But these are the basis. These are the references that everyone goes off. Particularly the Isaba of Ibn Hajar, because he's later on and he actually takes from these first two sources. Yeah.
So you know how like in Sirah, there's like the whole classification of hadith and like leniency when it comes to narration to Sirah. So how does it work for, I guess, like the Sahaba biographies in terms of like authenticity?
In general, that's you'd say, in general, history there's more leniency in history.
We also have reports then like similar to how we base a lot of our Sirah off of like hadith, like whether it's the Hisham others have collected. Is it the same for the Sahabi? Like, are there chains with?
They'll have asanid
Okay.
For different reports. Right? That's why you have the classification of hadith, whether it's mawquf or marfu' or whatnot. Right?
Well, would they be collecting the hadith books, or are these like a different? Like, are they considered the same part of the corpus in normal hadith, or is it different?
It depends, right? You have sometimes you'll have athar sahaba and whatnot, which may fall under the hadith corpus, like musannafat, right? They're gonna have narrations from sahaba and whatnot, but not necessarily about their biographies, but more their opinions or fatwa, things like that would fall under would fall into that category. Biographies would be more in books of history and taraj and whatnot.
That are documented by like similar names that we're familiar with. Like, is it the same?
Yeah.
Hadithun or like
Similar, exactly. Yeah, because this is the realm of hadith.
It's not something we're usually exposed. Like, we know hadith, we know the books of hadith.
Yeah.
But like, we don't really know the books of.
Well, that's the idea. That's the idea, right? You get to get familiar with those works. So at least this, you get familiar with the books related to the Sahaba, right? And so, essentially, what we'll do is there are 7, and 3 of you, so one person's gonna have to take an extra one.
7.
There are 7 Sahaba, and each of you are gonna be tasked with one biography. So each week, essentially, one person will be presenting. You want to know, right? I guess I'll text out some general bullet points you want to hit when talking about them, but essentially their life before Islam, when did they accept Islam? Were they from the Muhajirun, from the Ansar? Did they, where did they live after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ? Who were their famous students? When did they pass away? Where did they pass away? All those, so kind of knowing their trajectory throughout their life.
So for some reason, you want us to read the Arabic part of all three of those books or one of those books?
Those are the three references if Isaba is good enough, you can just do Isaba.
So basically, each week, they'll assign us like Sahabi, you read slash skim through the books for the main points and then present it.
Exactly. So at a minimum, look at Isaba. If you want to get familiar with the other works, you can. But at a minimum, just look at Isaba. And even if you don't read it extensively, at least you're getting those main points and you're getting exposure to the book. So Abu Huraira, I'll give to you Zainab, Abdullah ibn Umar, Afraz, um, Anas ibn Malik, Zainab, Aisha, Afraz, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Zainab, I'm going to give you one extra one. That's fine with you. Okay. So Abdullah ibn Abbas is you, and then I'll leave Jabir and Abu Sa'id for Ziyan. If he's not consistent, then I will split it between you two. Inshallah.
So Jabir,
Jabir and Abu Sa'id are for Ziyan. So those are the last two.
out of curiosity, what, like, this kind of goes back to the question. So, for example, Aisha and or even other Sahabi, to what extent do their biographies encompass, like, other Shi'i reports, or, like, I guess, more controversial, like, like, type reports, or is it really just within the mainstream what we've already known?
There is going to be mainly mainstream stuff. There may be references to those things, but it's not going to go into a critical analysis of the Shi'i reports.
Just because, like, it's considered a part of, like, disputed history, right? So it doesn't mention it.
It may mention it, but it's not. I don't know how much it's actually going to discuss it, even if it is referenced, right? 0, 4. So these are the. So, I mean, obviously this class is studying Tirmidhi, but I think this is so throwing this type of stuff in will make it more beneficial, inshallah. And so we'll see how this goes, how you guys are able to manage, and we'll decide how to move forward with other narrators, inshallah. Um, and you also have 3 Sahaba that they categorize as the Mi'in. Their narrations are not, which are in the hundreds, but they're not. They don't go to, right? They don't reach that threshold of 1,000. So that some scholars, bottom scholars, add that to make it the list 10. So they add Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, and Ali ibn Abi Talib. And I believe that's the second PDF, the Sheikh Abdullah Sa'ad one. He adds those 3 as well. So I believe that's where that's from. Um, I'll just send this out right now, just bullet points to hit. This, and then, so one thing is name and lineage, if they're from the Quraysh, you wanna know what tribe they're from, where their nasab goes back to the nasab of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if they're from the Ansar, then know what Aus and Khazraj and which sub-tribe from the Aus and Khazraj. So then there's some bullet points to try to hit. I just sent it on the WhatsApp group. And so, I mean, those, you can go beyond that, but at a minimum, try to hit those bullet points. So they're just, that's just a list I kind of came up
So what's the format you want? They're not a formal presentation, basically just a summary that we share.
with. Yeah, if you have some bullet points you want to share with the class in a document, that would be good. If you have your written notes or whatever, that's,
Maybe we'll just create one big large Google Docs that you can reference. all.
yeah, that's what I did last year.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that'd probably be good. Okay, with that, we will get started. Any questions on that? Any questions on that? It should be fine, right? It shouldn't be too much to do.
Sheikh, when do we present these?
From next week.
I'll post it.
Okay,
So Abu Hurairah, so you'd be starting, you do Abu Hurairah next week, and then Afrad the week after. So one person each week, essentially.
okay, sure.
I just posted the schedule in the Google Doc with the dates.
Okay.
And the website.
Okay. In terms of what we're reading, if there are this chapter, this Abwab Sifat al-Jannah, you have the book of Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, Hadi al-Arwah ila Bilad al-Afrah, ila Bilad al-Afrah, which is a detailed discussion on basically the hereafter and different masail related to that. He gets into some academic discussions. He starts off the book talking about the whole discussion on whether the Jannah that Adam and Hawa were in was the Jannah that we're going to go to, or was it on this earth? And that whole debate, that whole scholarly debate, talks about whether the Jannah is in existence to this point at this moment. And he goes into a lot of different topics related to that. And so I sent a link to download it. If you want to read up more, then I didn't send it.
The link for-
Yeah. So I sent a link to the book of Ibn Qayyim.
And now you said that's the description, so.
So that has a lot of discussions related, more, I guess you could say, detailed discussions on different topics that come up. Not all the topics that come up in the book are going to come up in there, but it's he has his books he picks specific topics and then goes into depth. And you see this with you see this in him, you see this in Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah as well, where I guess their grasp of the Sunnah is so, and their mastery of the Sunnah is so great that they like the amount of references they bring for everything is beautiful, right? So the number of the hadith they're going to bring for the top, he's going to bring on different topics and whatnot. It's something you don't find. The other thing is the muhaqqiq, the editor, at the beginning, he'll mention other books that talk about this topic. So you have other references you can go to on a particular topic, right? Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah has his particular leanings, which will show in the work, but that doesn't mean you can't benefit from it and appreciate it, even if you don't necessarily follow him in every position that he holds.
Check, are you saying in relation, like what is the book in relation to?
So it's about the hereafter.
Okay.
It's about the hereafter in general. Yeah, another reference that's famous on this topic is Tadhkirah of Al-Qurtubi. This is not the Mufassir Qurtubi. Tadhkirah fi أحوال الموت. I forgot what the full title is. التذكرة بأحوال الموتى وأمور الآخرة. So that's also a famous reference on this topic that you can look at. I haven't read either of these books cover to cover, but I've referenced them from time to time. And I'm trying to read Hadd al-Arwah as I go through this year. As we go through these chapters this year. And then, yeah, so those are books that you can reference. With that, we'll get started. Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So again, when we start, we make reference to the isnad by saying, وَبِالسَّنَدِ الْمُتَّصِلِ مِنَّا إِلَى الْإِمَامِ. And then, right, you can have different titles. إِلَى الْإِمَامِ الْهُمَامِ الْحَافِظِ. And then you want to say the full name of the author. And this helps you remember the name of the author, but it's also out of respect for him. Abi Isa, Muhammad ibn Isa ibn Sawrat al-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah ta'ala. Right, make dua for him, rahimahullah ta'ala. And then you make dua that Allah allows us to benefit from his works and from this book in particular and from his knowledge. So وَمَتَّعْنَا بِعُلُومِهِ وَبَرَكَاتِهِ آمين. And then قال باب ما جاء في صفة الجنة ونعيمها. The chapter on the description of the Jannah and its bounties. I'll read this just to, I'll read this chapter just to get you guys started, and then from the next chapter you guys can read. وبه قال حدثنا أبو كريب. This is Abu Kurayb Muhammad ibn Ala. This is one of the main teachers of Tirmidhi that he narrates from in the Sunan. قال حدثنا محمد بن فضيل عن حمزة الزيات. This is the famous Qari from the 7 Qurra. Hamza الزيات عن زياد الطائي عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وعنهم. We mentioned last time that we want to say, we want to add وعنهم, just to remember the rest of the scholars in the chain, because they also have a right over us for us to make dua for them. رضي الله عنه وعنهم قال قلنا يا رسول الله ما لنا إذا كنا عندك رقت قلوبنا وزاهدنا وكنا من أهل الآخرة فإذا خرجنا من عندك فآنسنا أهالينا وشممنا الأولاد أنكرنا أنفسنا. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لو أنكم تكونون إذا خرجتم من عندي كنتم على حالكم ذلك لزارتكم الملائكة في بيوتكم ولو لم تذنبوا لجاء الله بخلق جديد كي يذنبوا فيغفر لهم. قال قلت يا رسول الله مما خلق الخلق؟ قال من الماء. قلت الجنة ما بناؤها؟ قال لبنة من فضة ولبنة من ذهب وملاطها المسك والأذفر وحصباؤها اللؤلؤ والياقوت وتربتها الزعفران ومن يدخلها ينعم ولا يبأس ويخلد لا يموت ولا تبلى ثيابهم ولا يفنى شبابهم. ثم قال ثلاث لا يرد دعوتهم الإمام العادل والصائم حين يفطر والدعوة المظلوم يرفعها فوق الغمام ويفتح لها أبواب السماء ويقول الرب تبارك وتعالى وعزتي لأنصرنك ولو بعد حين. هذا حديث ليس إسناده بذاك القوي وليس هو عندي بمتصل وقد روي هذا الحديث بإسناد آخر عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه. So just looking at this last point first, right, this is Imam Tirmidhi commenting on the hadith, and that's why in the title he says وَمَعْرِفَةِ الصَّحِيحِ وَالْمَعْلُولِ وَمَا عَلَيْهِ الْعَمَلِ, that he comments on the authenticity of the hadith. This is not something related to amal, and so that's why he's not going to talk about the opinions of the fuqaha, right? So he says هذا حديث ليس إسناده بذاك القوي. This hadith, its chain is not that strong, and it is not connected according to me, and it is narrated. This hadith is narrated with another chain from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. So he's talking about the weakness of the hadith. And so the weakness of this hadith comes from Ziyad al-Ta'i, who is majhul, and he is known to do irsal from Abu Hurairah, because it's not established that he ever met Abu Hurairah.
You said he's reported to
Irsal, meaning he narrates mursal narration. He narrates, he doesn't narrate directly from Abu Hurairah. He drops a narrator, right? Because he's not reported to have done, to have narrated from him.
Yeah,
Al-Ta'i. So this is if you look in the chain, it's the one right before Abu Hurairah. Right.
So what is
So that's why Imam Tirmidhi says it's not muttasil, right?
I guess in like
وليس هو عندي بمتصل.
Sheikh Akram's class, so like is it something we would not use? Or
So he's saying yeah, exactly. That's what Imam Tirmidhi is highlighting. It's weak.
as opposed to the lot of arguments when you want to highlight the weakness.
Huh?
There's still a lot of arguments like report these things, but they highlight the weakness.
Yeah, and you can use these as supporting. You may be able to use these to support it, like if the matan coincides with an authentic narration, right? That's why there's a difference between saying an isnad is sahih and a hadith is sahih. When you say, that's why scholars of tahqiq, they'll say, if you're doing dirasa and you're studying a chain, then you can say this isnad is weak, or this isnad is sahih at most, but you shouldn't say this hadith is sahih or this hadith is da'if, because hadith you have to look at all the different chains, and so this particular chain is weak. There may be parts of it that are supported by other authentic hadith.
So for Tirmidhi, is he bringing this here where it's permissible for us to basically say the isnad is weak, but we use it because the hadith is sound in meaning, or do we avoid it altogether?
So he brings it because he brings it that this is the best narration I have, and it's not the most authentic, but it's yeah, I guess he brings it because this is what he feels is the best narration for this chapter, even if it's not the most authentic. But then he highlights the weakness in it. And by no means am I an expert on the methodology of maybe, but that's kind of the idea overall. And you also have this. This is a hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. You also have a similar hadith coming from Hanzala radiallahu anhu, which is more famous in regards to this. And so this hadith is, you can break it down in four categories. One is the fluctuation of one's spiritual state. The second is that it's human nature to sin, right? And this is related to the first because that's showing that since it's human nature to sin, your spiritual state will fluctuate. And then talking about the creation of human beings and Jannah, what are human beings in Jannah made of, and the people whose du'as are not rejected. Just going through the translation because there are some words that are a little difficult. Abu Hurairah narrates, he said, "We said, O Messenger of Allah, what is with us when we are with you? Our hearts are soft and we are indifferent to the world. And we are from the people of the hereafter. And when we leave from your company, then we feel comfortable. We feel comfortable. We enjoy being we feel comfortable with our family. We enjoy being with our family. وشممنا الأولاد شم يشم means to smell. وشممنا الأولاد when we smell our children.
I have socialized.
You socialize? Okay. Let me double check this. Shut.
I think it's the same
when you're with your children. Actually, going to your question, I have over here in my notes. Actually, this hadith, although in and of itself it's weak, each part of the hadith is supported by different narrations that are authentic. And so, even if this individual hadith is weak, it basically combines portions that are supported from four different authentic hadiths.
Yeah, but so I guess the question in addition to that was like throughout the book, do you know is that the case? Just in light of like from yesterday, you were saying like on a lot of the collections, you have to know how to read it, what the intention of the author was. You were saying how in like in Sahih Muslim, I guess it's Sahih Muslim, but there's a whole tabaqa that is so you can't just quote that and say it's Sahih. He's bringing it up to highlight the weakness in the chain. So here, when he's bringing up the weakness, every time he's bringing up the weakness, is he only reporting hadith that are supported by other hadith and then?
Not always, but he's one of his goals is to highlight the ilal in hadith.
But we can use all of these as long as we highlight the chain weakness.
Um,
I mean, you can't say this is just like,
they're generally speaking, they would be at a level where if you are of the opinion that you can use weak hadith,
Yeah.
as long as you explain that it's weak, you can use it. Um, but whether they're all supported or not, that would be a case by case basis.
and
So,
at least in relation to like sifat and stuff like that, if you're of the opinion that you can use weak hadith, then it's not like a 50 out, like back down, right?
exactly. So sometimes he will just bring a weak hadith because there's nothing else on the topic. Right? That's the best thing you could find on the topic. And he'll highlight the weakness or whatnot. But yeah. Um, okay, I'll have to look that word up again. But essentially interacting with our children. I'll write that down. أنكرنا أنفسنا we don't recognize ourselves. أنكرنا أنفسنا, we don't recognize ourselves, meaning that we feel like we're completely different people when we're with our family. So the Prophet ﷺ said, if you were as لو تكونون إذا خرجتم من عندي كنتم على حالكم ذلك. If you were, when you left me on that same state, state of yours, then the angels would have visited you in your homes. And if you did not sin, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have brought a new creation so that they would sin and He would forgive them. And he said, I said, O Messenger of Allah, what was mankind created from water? Right. This is in no, this is in reference, right? There's the ayah. والله خلق كل دابة من ماء وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي, right? So in reference to those ayahs, essentially.
So, but when you say so we're saying both turab and that?
Yeah. So in different aspects, right? Turab is the creation of Adam alayhi salam is from turab. But in general, right? In general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He created creation from water. I'll have to double check the tafsir of that, but it's in reference to those ayat.
That's just when you're saying like in different aspects. So like Adam is
So-
both clay and water.
So Adam alayhi salam is created from clay, from turab, right? So when you say we're created from turab, it's not in reference to everyone, but it's talking about originally from Adam alayhi salam. I'll have to double check I'll have to check the mimma in. I'll have to look up the tafsir of the ayah to give you more details on that.
There is a disputed hadith that Adam was created right there. Turab and that. And it's only disputed not because of the chain, because the chain, I guess, is unknown, but it's recorded in some parts of like certain Hadith scholars. But I guess I was always confused about that. But
Okay.
it sounds like it could potentially be the case.
Let me double check that. Sure. And I said, what is Jannah made out of? It's made of bricks of silver and bricks of gold, and it's mortar. Milat is the mortar, the thing you put in between bricks to hold the bricks together, is al-adthar, right? Adthar is something with a strong smell. It can be used for something good or bad. Over here, it's talking about misk, so it's something that misk that has a very strong and good smell. وحصباؤها اللؤلؤ والياقوت. Hasba are its pebbles, right? Its stones are pearls and yaqut, I believe, are rubies. وتربتها زعفران, and its dirt is za'faran, and whoever enters it is enjoy is in enjoyment and is never yes, how do you translate that? ولا يبأس, he's never in need. لا يفتقر ولا يحتاج. And he lives forever and he does not die, and his clothes do not get worn out, and his youth does not go away. And three people whose du'as are not rejected: the just leader, and the fasting person when he breaks his fast, and the du'a of the oppressed, which is raised above the clouds, the Ghamam is clouds, and the doors of the heavens are open for it, and the Lord most blessed and most high says, by my honor I will help you, even if it is after a period of time.
Since we're not studying on these hadith are commonly quoted today, right? So is this in relation to this hadith or stronger?
So that's the thing. This is supported. This part is supported by a narration in Musnad Imam Ahmad and Ibn Majah, and as well as another narration, right? So that's the point, right? He's bringing this, and in this case, this is something that's supported, but he's just bringing a more comprehensive narration. You have this concept that where people, even modern scholars, they have this idea where they will piece together different mutun that are talking about the same hadith, and one narration will have one detail, one narration will have another detail, and they'll piece it together into one like combined hadith almost, right? So instead of doing that, he's just bringing something that's comprehensive that may have a weaker chain, but it has multiple hadith together to show that this is all, I'm trying to say that this is all from one incident. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Don't read the next. Afraz, why don't you read the next?
We practice the listening
Yeah, that's
وبسند متصل منا عن الإمام
Ilal, right, with the connected chain to the Imam.
إلى الإمام أبي عيسى محمد بن عيسى بن سورة الترمذي
رحمه
الله متعنا بعلومه وبركاته
آمين.
آمين. قال باب ما جاء في صفة غرف الجنة.
وبه قال. So whenever you have حدثنا or أخبرنا, you're going to say قال before it. And then before starting a hadith, you're going to say after. The first time you would say وبالسند المتصل منا, and then you would say وبه.
وبه قال حدثنا علي بن حجر حدثنا علي بن مسهر عن عبد الرحمن بن اسحاق عن النعمان بن سعد عن علي رضي الله عنه وعنهم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن في الجنة لغرفا يرى ظهورها من بطونها وبطونها من ظهورها. فقام إليه أعرابي فقال لمن هي يا نبي الله؟ قال هي لمن أطاب الكلام وأطعم الطعام وأدام الصيام وصلى لله بالليل والناس نيام. هذا حديث غريب، وقد تكلم بعض أهل الحديث في عبد الرحمن بن إسحاق هذا من قبل حكمه، وهو كوفي، وعبد الرحمن بن إسحاق القرشي مديني، وهو أثبت من هذا.
So over here in this hadith, you'll notice he's commenting on one of the narrators who shares a name with a name with another famous narrator. who is Abdul Rahman ibn Ishaq. So he's clarifying who he is. He's saying that this this is the Abdul Rahman ibn Ishaq who's Kufan, not the one who's from Medina. And so he's clarifying that so that one doesn't get confused, because Abdul Rahman ibn Ishaq al-Qurashi al-Madani, he's more reliable, and so that would make the chain, that would make someone think that the chain is more reliable. He's saying, no, this is a different Rahman ibn Ishaq. Yeah. Go ahead. Any question?
No.
Mhm. Go ahead, continue.
قال حدثنا
وبه قال.
Oh, so everything?
Yes, before every hadith.
وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار حدثنا عبد الرحمن
قال حدثنا.
قال حدثنا عبد العزيز بن عبد الصمد العمي عن ابي عمران الجوني عن ابي بكر عن ابي بكر بن عبد الله
عن أبي بكر بن
عن ابي بكر بن عبد الله بن قيس عن ابيه رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ان في الجنه جنتين من فضه آنيتهما وما فيهما وجنتين من ذهب آنيتهما وما فيهما وما بين القوم وبين أن ينظروا إلى ربهم إلا رضاء الكبرياء على وجهه في جنة عدن.
Continue to then.
وبهذا الإسناد عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن في الجنة لخيمة من درة مجوفة عرضها 60 ميلا في كل زاوية منها أهل لا يرون آخرين يطوف عليهم المؤمن. هذا حديث صحيح. وأبو عمران الجوني اسمه عبد الملك بن حبيب. وأبو بكر بن أبي موسى قال أحمد بن حنبل لا يعرف اسمه. وأبو موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه اسمه عبد الله بن قيس.
Okay. So he's highlighting over here before talking about the hadith, right? This last point. He's saying Abu Imran al-Jawni, his name is Abdul Malik ibn Habib, and then he's saying Abu Bakr. It comes Abu Bakr ibn Abdullah ibn Qais an Abihi. So who's his Abi? Who's his father? He's saying this is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and his name is Abdullah ibn Qais. So Abu Musa is his kunya, but his real name is Abdullah, and his father's name is Qais. So this is a Sahabi. So if you look at the chain of the previous hadith, it's عن أبي بكر بن عبد الله بن قيس عن أبيه رضي الله عنه. So there's the question, so he's narrating from Abdullah ibn Qais. Is he a Sahabi or not? Who is he? Who is his father? That he's narrating directly from the Prophet. So Imam Tirmidhi is clarifying that the Abdullah ibn Qais is the name of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. And so he's highlighting that because there may be confusion, because normally he's not known by that name.
Wait, sorry, so you said Abdullah ibn Qais is Abu Musa, but then it says an Abi.
Well, he's saying Abu Bakr ibn Abdullah ibn Qais an Abihi. So Abu Bakr is narrating from Abdullah ibn Qais, essentially, right? And he says an Abihi. That make sense?
Yeah.
So the first hadith is the first hadith translation is pretty straightforward. إن في الجنة لا غرفا. There in Jannah there are rooms or homes. There are rooms where you can see يرى ظهورها من بطونها وبطونها من ظهورها, that you can see it's outside from the inside and the inside from the outside. right? And this is a form of beauty. You think about houses and homes, you have larger windows and all those types of things that make something more beautiful. This doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be privacy, but it's a sign of beauty. Uh, right, and it came in the it comes in the later hadith that they're from hollowed out pearls, right? Min durratin mujawwafatin. You have in the last hadith that in Jannah you have khayma is talks about a tent, more like a home or a room made from hollowed out pearls. Whose width is 60 miles. And so he mentions this in the first hadith that you can see outside and inside. The next hadith he says, إن في الجنة جنتين من فضة آنيتهما وما فيهما. This is a little bit confusing, but essentially آنيتهما وما فيهما. You would say آنيتهما وما فيهما كذلك. That there are in Jannah, there are two gardens made of silver and its containers, and what is in both of those gardens is like that, meaning everything in it is made from silver. وجنتين من ذهب آنيتهما وما فيهما. And two gardens from gold, meaning all the containers and whatever is in it is made from gold.
So in it meaning the garden, not the
Yeah. Look at it saying فيهما. فيهما is referring to the جنتين. وما بين القوم وبين أن ينظروا إلى ربهم إلا رداء الكبرياء. And there is nothing between this group of people and seeing their Lord except the rida is a cloak, kibriya is greatness. And so this على وجهه في جنة عدن, on his face in the garden of Aden, in the eternal garden in paradise. Right? So rida al-kibriya, right? This is a sifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so this goes into the whole. This goes into that whole aqadi discussion of sifat. Another narration is it comes al-kibriya ridai wal-'azamatu izari. And then right, so these are this goes into essentially it talks about the sifat. And he talks about this in the footnote a little bit. I'll have to look into the description of this more, but essentially this goes into that whole discussion of sifat. And so if you take the position of ta'wil, it may be understood in this particular way. Otherwise, it's you kind of leave it at that.
You think that refers to even like a much negative reference? Are they both dual?
Ania is singular.
Is there any oh, that is the woman also.
And وفي كل زاوية, the last hadith we talked about it a little bit, hollowed out pearls, في كل زاوية منها أهل لا يرون الآخرين, in every corner as a أهل over here refers to spouse. إنها أهل wife who لا يرون الآخرين, who do not see others, um, and the believer goes between them. باب ما جاء في صفة درجات الجنة. Zainab, you read this?
Yes. Bismillah.
Zian,
Um,
you turn on your camera. Assalamu alaikum.
Awesome.
The new rule this year is turning on your camera. So,
Okay. Let me. Okay. Give me a sec.
okay. Go ahead, Zainab.
وبالسند
Yeah.
أوكي. وبالسند المتصل منا إلى الإمام الهمام الحافظ أبي عيسى محمد بن عيسى بن سورة الترمذي رحمه الله تعالى ومتعنا بعلومه وبركاته آمين. قال باب ما جاء في صفة درجات الجنة. وبه قال حدثنا عباس العنبري قال حدثنا يزيد بن
ساكنين, so you say عباس العنبري.
قال حدثنا عباس العنبري قال حدثنا يزيد بن هارون قال حدثنا شريك عن محمد بن جحادة عن عطاء عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وعنهم قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الجنة 100 درجة ما بين كل درجتين 100 عام. هذا حديث حسن غريب. Continue.
Yeah, continue. Read through the whole chapter.
Okay. قال حدثنا قتيبة وأحمد
قال.
وبه قال حدثنا قتيبة وأحمد بن عبدة الضبي قال حدثنا عبد العزيز
Here he is
بن
narrating from two teachers who both narrate from Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad. So
قال حدثنا عبد العزيز بن محمد عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار عن معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنه وعنهم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من صام رمضان وصلى الصلاة وحج البيت لا أدري أذكر الزكاة أم لا إلا كان حقا على الله أن يغفر له إن هاجر في سبيل الله أو مكث بأرضه التي ولد بها. قال معاذ ألا أخبر بها الناس؟ فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذر الناس يعملون فإن في الجنة 100 درجة ما بين كل درجتين كما بين السماء والأرض والفردوس أعلى الجنة وأوسطها وفوق ذلك عرش الرحمن ومنها تفجر أنهار الجنة فإذا سألتم الله فاسألوه الفردوس. هكذا روي هذا الحديث عن هشام بن سعد عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار عن معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنه وهذا عندي أصح من حديث همام عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله
عن
عنه عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه وعطاء لم يدرك معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنه ومعاذ رضي الله عنه قديم الموت مات في خلافة عمر رضي الله عنه. وبه قال حدثنا عبد الله بن عبد الرحمن أخبرنا يزيد بن قال أخبرنا يزيد بن هارون قال أخبرنا همام عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه وعنهم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال في الجنة 100 درجة ما بين كل درجتين كما بين السماء والأرض والفردوس أعلاها درجة ومنها تفجر أنهار الجنة الأربعة ومن فوقها يكون العرش فإذا سألتم الله فاسألوه الفردوس. حدثنا أحمد بن منيع
قال. So this isn't marked as another hadith, but it's a new chain that's starting. So whenever there's a new chain, you would say وَبِهِ قَالَ.
Okay. وبه قال حدثنا أحمد بن منيع قال حدثنا يزيد بن هارون قال حدثنا همام عن زيد بن أسلم نحوه. وبه قال حدثنا قتيبة قال حدثنا ابن لهيعة عن دراج عن أبي الهيثم عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن في الجنة 100 درجة لو أن العالمين اجتمعوا في إحداهن لوسعتهم. هذا حديث غريب.
So he talks. This is the description of the levels of paradise. And so he said, "Inna fil jannati mi'atu darajatin ma bayna kulli darajatayn mi'atu 'am." So daraja can be in the physical sense and in the ma'nawi sense as well. And so when we're talking about 100 levels, it's talking about both, meaning in terms of the physical sense, one is going to be higher than the other, but also in terms of the blessings that are there and the enjoyment that's there. Right? And as opposed to when we talk about the hellfire, we have darakat, right? إن المنافقين في الدرك الأسفل من النار. And so that's the word for the levels of the hellfire. Some narrations mention that there's a distance of 50 years between each level of Jannah. Well, this one mentions 100 years. This could be relative to the speed of travel or whatnot. And so that could be one explanation of why there is a difference in those numbers. So some narration mentioned that there's 50, it's between one level and the next is 50 years. Over here, it says, مَا بَيْنَ كُلِّ دَرَجَتَيْنِ مِئَةُ عَامٍ. One possible explanation is it's talking relative to the speed at which someone is traveling. So if someone travels faster, the distance would be covered in 50 years, versus if someone travels slower, the distance would be covered in 100 years.
Because 100 is also relative, right?
Everything, I mean, the calculating distance based on time, that is assuming a particular speed. That's what he's saying. So essentially, the Prophet ﷺ, when speaking to a particular audience, gave them a particular time based on what they would understand. The distance they would understand would be covered in that particular time. And in front of a different audience, it was a distance that would be covered in 50 years according to them, according to what they would expect. Right, and then next hadith he talks about, he highlights the basis of salvation is the 5 pillars and mastering those, right? So he says, and it talks about fasting and salah and hajj and potentially zakah. Then إِلَّا كَانَ حَقًّا عَلَى اللَّهِ أَن يَغْفِرَ لَهُ. It is a right upon Allah that He forgives. And this is just fulfilling those basics, right? And this goes back to the different hadith that talk about, for example, the Bedouin who came in and asked about his obligations, and he said, I won't do anything beyond that, right? This is the basis of our salvation. We need to focus on this to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and mastering these are the keys to Jannah, and everything else builds on these things. Right, and in this hadith he explains, ما بين كل درجتين كما بين السماء والأرض. So describing it in a different light, in a different way, showing the distance between, explaining the distance between the 2 levels in a different way. Over here, الفردوس أعلى الجنة وأوسطها. أوسط over here means أفضل, right? The greatest. Right, and so وفوق ذلك عرش الرحمن, and above that is the throne of the most merciful, and from it spring the rivers of Jannah. So if you ask Allah, then ask for Al-Firdaus. Right, the Prophet ﷺ, you have the famous hadith of Mu'adh radiallahu anh, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that whoever says La ilaha illallah enter Jannah, essentially, and he stopped Mu'adh radiallahu anh from spreading that to the people. The idea was that this will make people lazy, because you should be aiming for al-Firdaus. You shouldn't just aim for entry into any level of paradise, but aim for Firdaus. And so the Prophet ﷺ here is highlighting that point as well, that when you ask for Jannah, ask for al-Firdaus. And so similarly, that hadith is saying when you strive for Jannah, then strive for al-Firdaus. And then he makes a comment over here about the chain. If we look at this, chain, you have the hadith of Mu'adh is not a different hadith. This is this hadith itself. قال معاذ لا أخبر به الناس. This particular hadith itself. And so if we look back at this chain, هكذا روي هذا الحديث عن هشام بن سعيد عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء بن يسار عن معاذ بن جبل. So we look back, the narration that we just narrated, this is from Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad عن زيد بن أسلم عن عطاء عن معاذ. So he's saying instead of Abdul Aziz, you have another narration from Hisham ibn Sa'ad, which is more authentic. Right? So from the difference is at that point, instead of Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad, it's Hisham ibn Sa'ad. And then he mentions وهذا عندي أصح من حديث همام عن زيد بن أسلم. That comes another narration which he'll bring after this. If you look at the following hadith, it's قال أخبرنا يزيد بن هارون قال أخبرنا همام عن زيد بن أسلم. So he's saying there's another narration from Hisham, this narration from Hisham ibn Sa'ad. This is more authentic than the hadith that he brings afterwards, which is Hammam from Zayd ibn Aslam. And so when he says asah, this doesn't necessarily mean that it is sahih. He's just saying, relatively speaking, it's at a higher level. So it could be that both are weak, but one is weaker than the other. And so the one that is less weak, he calls it asah. Asah doesn't necessarily mean it's authentic. So just saying it's more authentic, meaning it could just mean it's less weak. So essentially we have from Zayd ibn Aslam, you have the hadith of Abdul Aziz ibn Muhammad. Then you have which is the hadith of Mu'adh, and then you have that same hadith of Mu'adh coming from Hisham ibn Sa'ad from Zayd ibn Aslam. So you have two chains from through Zayd ibn Aslam from Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. And then you have another hadith which he brings over here, which is from Hammam from Zayd ibn Aslam, but the Sahabi changes, and now this is Ubadah ibn Samit. Right? And so he says, commenting on that change in the Sahabi, he says, وَعَطَاءٌ لَمْ يُدْرِكْ مُعَاذَ بْنَ جَبَلٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. The Ata didn't narrate from Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Because Mu'adh passed away earlier. He passed away in the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu. So it's almost like he's saying that. It seems like he's saying that it makes more sense that it would be Ubadah ibn Samit, who's narrating this hadith. Um, um, I'm sorry. I guess making that conclusion is maybe a little bit difficult, but at a minimum, he's highlighting that there is inqita in the chain that Ata narrates from. Ata never narrates from Mu'adh, and so there's inqita in that chain. And so he's highlighting the weakness. Mu'adh radiallahu anhu passed away in the plague of Amwas, right, during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu. This final narration is also Qutayba narrates from Ibn Lahi'a. Ibn Lahi'a is considered, he was an imam in a great scholar of his time. However, in terms of itqan, he was not the best, and so he was considered, in terms of his accuracy, essentially, he was not the best, and so he's considered weak. So he's, because of Ibn Lahi'a, this last narration is also weak. The next chapter. I'll read the next chapter, inshallah. وبه قال باب ما جاء في صفة نساء أهل الجنة. وبه قال حدثنا عبد الله بن عبد الرحمن قال حدثنا فروة بن أبي المغراء قال حدثنا عبيدة بن حميد عن عطاء بن السائب عن عمرو بن ميمون عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إن المرأة من نساء أهل الجنة لا يرى بياض ساقها من وراء 70 حلة حتى يرى مخها، وذلك بأن الله تعالى يقول: كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان، فأما الياقوت فإنها حجر لو أدخلت فيه سلكا ثم استصفيته لا أريته من ورائه. وبه قال حدثنا هناد قال حدثنا عبيدة بن حميد عن عطاء بن السائب عن عمرو بن ميمون عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نحوه. وبه قال حدثنا هناد قال حدثنا أبو الأحوص عن عطاء بن السائب عن عمرو بن ميمون عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه وعنهم نحوه بمعناه ولم يرفعه. نحوه بمعنى, meaning it's a similar narration, but the wording is different, but it has the same meaning, and so it supports it. وَلَمْ يَرْفَعْهُ, and it is an athar of Ibn Mas'ud, he doesn't attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وهذا أصح من حديث عبيدة بن حميد. So if we go back to this chain, right? You have Abidah ibn Humayd in the first hadith, and then he brings another chain which also goes through Abidah ibn Humayd, and they all go back to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. But those first two chains are marfu'. They say عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then you have this other chain he brings from, instead of Abidah, you have Abu al-Ahwas عن عطاء ibn Sa'ib, narrating from Ibn Mas'ud, but it is not marfu', and he says وَهَذَا أَصَحُّ مِنْ حَدِيثِ عَبِيدَةِ بْنِ حُمَيْدٍ. So he's saying it is more authentic, it is more correct to say that this is the athar of Ibn Mas'ud and not a marfu' hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then obviously afterwards you can have the discussion of whether it's marfu' hukman or not. But in terms of the chain itself, it's more correct to say that Ibn Mas'ud did not attribute it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وهكذا روى جرير وغير واحد عن عطاء بن السائب ولم يرفعوه. And this is what many others narrate from Jarir. So there's these two that narrate from Ata. There are these two that narrate from Ata that narrate it marfu'an, but others do not. وبه قال حدثنا سفيان بن وكيع قال حدثنا أبي عن فضيل بن مرزوق عن عطية عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن أول زمرة يدخلون الجنة يوم القيامة على مثل ضوء القمر ليلة البدر والزمرة الثانية على مثل أحسن كوكب دري في السماء لكل رجل منهم زوجتان على كل زوجة 70 حلة يرى مخ ساقها من ورائها. هذا حديث حسن صحيح. وبه قال حدثنا العباس بن محمد قال حدثنا عبيد الله بن موسى قال حدثنا شيبان عن فراس عن عطية عن أبي سعيد الخدري رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أول زمرة تدخل الجنة على صورة القمر ليلة البدر والثانية على لون أحسن كوكب دري في السماء لكل رجل منهم زوجتان على كل زوجة 70 حلة يبدو مخ ساقها من ورائها. هذا حديث حسن صحيح. So over here, this is the chapter on the description of the woman of the people of Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ, he gives the example. He says that the whiteness of their shin is seen through 70 layers of clothing until you see her bone marrow, or the bone marrow of the calf, right? وذلك بأن الله تعالى يقول كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان. So this is a metaphor. This is a comparison to precious metals. Yaqut wal marjan. Yaqut are rubies. I believe marjan are emeralds or like green stones. They're precious stones essentially, right? You have tissue. Okay. So this is essentially the Prophet ﷺ doing tafsir of the Quran. He's doing tafsir of this ayah كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان. That this is talking about that, right? If you have a ruby and you string it's a stone. If you put a string inside of it and then you polished it, then you polished it, then you would see through it. You'd see that string, that rope going through it very clearly. And so that is a form of beauty for that ruby. And so the beauty of the woman of Jannah is being compared to that, the beauty of that precious stone. Yaqut is rubies. Marjan, I believe, is emeralds or like a green stone. Let me double check. So it says over here. It says, oh, okay, sorry. It says coral. Okay, Marjan says coral, rubies and coral. That's how the translators translate it. Coral. Yeah, I guess I'm confusing another word. Marjan is coral. So rubies and coral. Rubies are read. Absolutely right. So comparing the beauty of that to the beauty of the woman of Jannah. Then we talked about this discussion of the isnad that came up. And then over here, some mentioned that these groups, the first group that's mentioned is the prophets, and then the second group is the awliya or the righteous of Allah, the righteous servants of Allah. And then right, لكل على كل زوجة 70 حلة, having layers of clothing. That's something that is a sign of beauty and status and whatnot. يرى مخ ساقها من ورائها, right? That came up earlier. Now this hadith mentions that لكل رجل منهم زوجتان, every man will have two wives. There's another hadith that mentions 72 wives. And so some talk about the weakness of that hadith. Others try to reconcile between the two hadith. And they say that he'll have two wives of the world, like this, two women, believing women from the dunya, like this, and then the remainder will be from the hurul ain. You can say that two will fit this description, and the remainder will not, or that the least of these group of people will have two wives, and they could potentially have more, going up to 72. So those are some ways that those that try to reconcile between the two hadith reconcile between those. And then this last hadith, he just brings it because there's it's very similar to the previous hadith, but it just comes through a different chain. You have Firas narrating from Atiyah instead of Fudayl ibn Marzuq. And for both of them, he says, Hasan Sahih. قال باب ما جاء في صفة جماع أهل الجنة. وبه قال حدثنا محمود بن غيلان ومحمد بن بشار قال حدثنا أبو داود الطيالسي. Generally speaking, you'll see Abu Dawud is at the tabaqa of the Abu Dawud as-Sijistani, who's the author of the Sunan, Sunan Abi Dawud. He is at the tabaqa of the teachers of Imam Tirmidhi. And Imam Tirmidhi generally doesn't narrate from, I think he narrates maybe one hadith, or I believe he narrates from him, but only a handful of hadith maybe. But he's at the tabaqa of the teachers of Imam Tirmidhi. Whereas this other Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, he has a famous Musnad, a hadith compilation organized by the narrators of the hadith. So that's this Abu Dawud, and so generally when you see it, sometimes over here he explicitly says al-Tayalisi, but if you see Abu Dawud in the second as the second narrator in the chain, then it's this Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, and he comes up quite often in the book. So he'll say Abu Dawud at this tabaqa, and it'll be understood that it's Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, so he won't necessarily clarify it. That is something to pay attention to. So it's not when he says Muhammad ibn Bashar, Mahmoud ibn Ghailan, they're not narrating from, they wouldn't narrate from Abu Dawud al-Sijistani. قال حدثنا أبو داود الطيالسي عن عمران القطان عن قتادة عن أنس رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال يعطى المؤمن في الجنة قوة كذا وكذا من الجماع. قيل يا رسول الله أيطيق ذلك؟ قال يعطى قوة 100. وفي الباب عن زيد بن أرقم رضي الله عنه هذا حديث صحيح غريب لا نعرفه من حديث قتادة عن أنس رضي الله عنه إلا من حديث عمران القطان. Um, so this is غريب, meaning because he says هذا حديث صحيح غريب. Sahih is authentic, but it's only coming from one chain. It's only coming through Imran al-Qattan, and so that's why he says gharib. So he says sahihun gharib for that reason over here. When it says kada wa kada, this is talking about essentially it's to express a large amount, and it's a, yeah, in terms of i'rab it would be considered tamyiz. So kada wa kada. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Next chapter on about ما جاء في صفة أهل الجنة, the chapter on the description of the people of Jannah. وبه قال حدثنا سويد بن نصر قال أخبرنا ابن المبارك قال أخبرنا معمر عن همام بن منبه عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وعنهم قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أول زمرة تلج الجنة صورتهم على صورة القمر ليلة البدر لا يبصقون ولا يمتخطون ولا يتغوطون آنيتهم فيها من ذهب وأمشاطهم من الذهب والفضة ومجامرهم من الألوة ورشحهم المسك ولكل واحد منهم زوجتان يرى مخ ساقهما من وراء اللحم من الحسن لا اختلاف بينهم ولا تباغض قلوبهم قلب رجل واحد يسبحون الله بكرة وعشيا. هذا حديث صحيح. وبه قال حدثنا سويد بن نصر قال حدثنا عبد الله بن المبارك قال حدثنا ابن لهيعة عن يزيد بن أبي حبيب عن داود بن عامر بن سعد بن أبي وقاص عن أبيه عن جده رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لو أن ما يقل ظفر مما في الجنة بدا لتزخرفت له ما بين خوافق السماوات والأرض ولو أن رجلا من أهل الجنة اطلع فبدأ ساوره لطمس ضوء الشمس تطمس شمس تطمس كما تطمس الشمس ضوء النجوم. هذا حديث غريب لا نعرفه بهذا الإسناد إلا من حديث ابن لهيعة. وقد روى يحيى بن أيوب هذا الحديث عن يزيد بن أبي حبيب وقال عن عمر بن سعد بن أبي وقاص عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So you have this hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu describing the people of Jannah. So the first group to enter Jannah, their physical form will be like the form of the moon on the night of the full moon, meaning the beauty of the moon, their beauty will be like the beauty of the moon. لا يبسطون ولا يمتخطون. Busaq is to they're not gonna spit, they're not gonna release mucus or phlegm, and they will not need to use the restroom. So none of these things these byproducts of the body that are considered dirty, none of these will be produced by the people of Jannah. Their containers will be of gold, and their combs will be of gold and silver. And their majamid, this is plural of mijmar. This is where the coals are lit for, like bukhur, right? Will be from uluwa is a type of wood. So it'll be from oud, right? Essentially. Right? It's a special type of oud, it's a special type of wood. And their sweat will be misk, and each of them will have 2 wives. The marrow of their calves will be seen through the meat due to this min is bayaniya. Min is bayaniya, due to because of their beauty. لا اختلاف بينهما ولا تباغض قلوبهم قلب رجل واحد. This is essentially there will be no hatred, no ill feelings, right? There won't be any unlike this world where there may be differences, they will not differ with one another, they will not have hatred towards one another. يسبحون الله بكرة وعشيا. Right, and so this is right. ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل إخوانا على سرر متقابلين. Right, we removed whatever bitterness they had in their hearts in a friendly manner. They'll be on couches facing one another. ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل. Right, this comes up in a couple places in the Quran. So any bitterness or hatred will be removed from the hearts of the people of Jannah. قلوبهم قلب رجل واحد. This is essentially saying the unity and the mutual love of the people of paradise will be as if their hearts are one. So لا اختلاف بينهما ولا تباغض. There's no differences and no mutual animosity. قلوبهم قلب رجل واحد. Their hearts are like one heart, meaning they're united. The next hadith, it's narrated from Dawood ibn Amir ibn Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, who narrates from his father, Amir, who narrates from his grandfather, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqas. So it's a genre in when you're talking about hadith, you have books on you have this is something that's highlighted those who narrate from their father, from their grandfather. Um, the most famous of this is Amr ibn Shu'ayb an Abihi an Jaddihi radiyallahu anhu, which is Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu. We'll talk about that more when it comes up. Qasim ibn Qutluha has a work on this where he just compiles all the different chains that are an Abihi an Jaddihi. لو أنما يقل ظفر مما في الجنة. Right, this is أقل يقل. This comes up in the Quran. حتى إذا أقلت سحابا ثقالا, until the time when they lift up the heavy clouds, we drive them to a dead land. حتى إذا أقلت سحابا. So أقل يقل means to raise something. And this phrase ما يقل ظفر, what essentially what a nail can raise, so a very small amount. So even if the tiniest amount, the amount that would get stuck in your nail essentially, were to show from Jannah, then it would adorn what is between the khawafiq means the plural of khafiqa, which means the side or the direction. Is referring to the four direction, north, south, east, west, right? The directions of the heavens and the earth. And so if a man from the people of Jannah were to come out, so his bracelets would become visible, then it would overpower, it would cover, it would wipe out the light of the sun. Just like the light of the sun wipes out covers the light of the stars. You only see the light of the stars when the sun is not there, because the sun is brighter than the stars. And then he mentions the hadith. This is a singular narration coming from, and it's weak because it's coming from Ibn Lahiya. And then you mentioned this narrated from, it comes from it comes in from another chain as well, but that chain is mursal because Umar ibn Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas is narrating directly from the Prophet ﷺ. So he's highlighting that there's and he's not a Sahabi, he's a Tabi'i. So there's another narration, but that is also mursal. باب ما جاء في صفة ثياب أهل الجنة. Zian, you want to try reading?
وبه قال باب ما جاء في صفة ثياب أهل الجنة. وبه قال حدثنا محمد بن بشار وأبو هشام الرفاعي قال حدثنا معاذ بن هشام عن أبيه عن عامر الأحوالي أحولي عن شهر بن حوشب عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وعنهم قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أهل الجنة جرد مرد كحلة لا يفنى شبابهم ولا تبلى ثيابهم. هذا حديث غريب. وبه قال حدثنا أبو كريب حدثنا
قال حدثنا آه، رشدين ابن سعد عن عمرو بن الحارث عن دراج أبي السمح عن أبي الهيثم عن أبي سعيد رضي الله عنه وعنهم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في قوله وفرش مرفوعة قال ارتفاعها لكما بين السماء والأرض مسيرة 500 عام. هذا حديث غريب لا نعرفه إلا من حديث رش رش رشدين.
Mhm.
قال بعض أهل العلم في تفسير هذا الحديث معناه أن الفرش في الدرجات وبين الدرجات كما بين السماء والأرض.
Okay. So you have this first hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, where it says the people of Jannah are Jurdun. This is the plural of Ajrad, which means to have no body here. Murdun is the plural of Amrad, which means to have no facial hair or to not have a beard. And Kahla is a plural of Kahil, which means to have eyes that look like they have kuhul applied to them. Right? And so those are all things of beauty. لا يفنى شبابهم ولا تبلى. ثيابهم, their youth does not go away and their clothes do not get worn out. And then he brings this next hadith coming from Rishdin ibn Sa'ad. And then I highlight that لا نعرفه إلا من حديث رشدين ibn Sa'ad, because Rishdin ibn Sa'ad is considered a weak narrator. And so by highlighting that this is only narrated through Rishdin, he's highlighting that this hadith is weak. And then it says عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في قوله وفرش مرفوعة ارتفاع. What is he's doing tafsir of the ayah وفرش مرفوعة ارتفاعها لكم لا كما بين السماء والأرض. Their elevation is like what is between the heavens and the earth, the distance of 50 years. And so he explains this over here, that this isn't talking about the actual furush, that they will be this high, but it's saying the levels that each firash is in is going to be that high. Essentially between one and the next is ما بين السماء والأرض, or the distance of 50 years. And so the second level is going to be raised above the first one by that distance, but it doesn't mean that each one is going to be that high. So each one is elevated above the other by this distance. So essentially over here he says معناه أن الفروش في الدرجات, the furush are in the levels, and between each of the darajat is the distance between the heavens and the earth. Then the question arises that why did Allah describe these furush, these beds or these couches, as being elevated, if they're not physically, if they're not tall in that physical sense? So it can also be talking about their status, that they're elevated in their status as well. So that's another explanation that's given as well. قال باب ما جاء في صفة ثمار الجنة. وبه قال حدثنا أبو كريب قال حدثنا يونس بن بكير عن محمد بن إسحاق عن يحيى بن عباد بن عبد الله بن الزبير عن أبيه عن أسماء بنت أبي بكر رضي الله عنهما وعنهم قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وذكر سدرة المنتهى قال يسير الراكب الفنن منها 100 سنة أو قال يستظل بظلها 100 راكب شك يحيى فيها فراش الذهب كأن ثمرها القلال. هذا حديث حسن صحيح غريب. So this hadith is coming from Asma binti Abi Bakr radiyallahu anhuma. And so she narrates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was mentioning Sidratul Muntaha. Sidra is the Sidr tree. Al-Muntaha, it's called Al-Muntaha because it is at it's the end, it's the border between the seven heavens and the throne. It is a place where the angels cannot go beyond. Fanan over here, right? This comes up in the Quran. Zawata afnan. Both have branches. So these are the straight branches of a tree. So a rider will ride in the shade of its branches 100 years. Or and this O is for Shak. He says Shakka Yahya. So this is going back to, if you go back to the chain, this is Yahya ibn Abbad ibn Abdullah ibn Zubayr. So Yahya ibn Abbad is doubtful on whether, he said, يسير الراكب في ظل الفنن منها 100 سنة أو يستظل بظلها 100 راكب. So you're not sure which description was accurate. And so this O is for Shak. When you have an O is for has different meanings, right? In terms of hadith, generally you have it comes for one of two meanings. It either comes for Shak or it comes for Tanwi'. Tanwi' is listing out different types of something, right? And so you would read that normally. The other type of O is for Shak. When O is for Shak, then you would say O qala. You would have a qala that is muqaddar, that is implied after the O. Sometimes the Shak is explicitly mentioned in the hadith that this narrator was doubtful on the wording, and sometimes you have to figure it out from the context. And the biggest hint at an O being for Shak is that before and after the O, both things have a very similar meaning. They're almost synonymous, but it's just a change in wording or something along those lines. And so in those cases, it would almost always be for Shak. And sometimes the shuruh will clarify that as well. Sometimes they won't. But and sometimes there will be places where scholars will differ. One scholar will say it's for Shak, and one scholar will say it's not. So there are varying levels of I guess precision in terms of whether an O is for Shak or not. Over here, it's the most clear because it's mentioned explicitly in the hadith itself. Or 100 riders will be shaded in its shade. In it is a couch or a bed of gold, and it is as if its fruits are. Qilal is the plural of qulla. Right? This is a large jug or a large container. That talking about the size of the fruits of Jannah, that they'll be huge, like they're like this large container. هذا حديث حسن صحيح غريب. We'll stop here, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Any questions before we wrap up? السلام.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Let's get started. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لله وكفى والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه أما بعد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. I have your cameras on. Some reason not to. We're continuing from page 600, ayah number 11 of Surah Ar-Rum. I don't know if you guys had a chance to come up with a reading schedule.
Not yet,
Okay,
but I can read.
okay. Let's get started and then we can jump in later. Okay, Bismillah.
Okay. From ayah number 11.
Yes.
Okay. Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. الله يبدأ الخلق أي ينشئ خلق الناس ثم يعيده أي خلقهم بعد موتهم ثم إليه ترجعون بالتاء والياء ويوم تقوم الساعة يبلس المجرمون يسكت المشركون لانقطاع حجتهم ولم يكن أي لا يكون لهم من شركائهم ممن أشركوهم بالله وهم الأصنام ليشفعوا لهم شفعاء وكانوا أي يكونون بشركائهم كافرين أي متبرئين منهم ويوم تقوم الساعة يومئذ تأكيد يتفرقون أي المؤمنون والكافرون فأما الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فهم في روضة جنة يحبرون يسرون يسرون وأما الذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا القرآن ولقاء الآخرة البعث وغيره فأولئك في العذاب محضرون. Yeah. It is Allah who originates the creation, meaning begins the creation of the people, and will resurrect it, meaning their creation after their death, and to him you will all be returned, and it can be read yurja'un or turja'un. On the day the hour will arrive, the wicked will be dumbstruck, meaning they will be silent, لانقطاع حجتهم, because their proof.
Yeah, لانقطاع حجتهم, because of their proofs being cut off. Literally, whatever they used to say, literally whatever they would say in this world cannot be said again, because the reality is now in front of them or will be in front of them, and as a result, inqita, right?
ولم يكن, there will be no intercessors for them from among their associate gods, those they took as partners with Allah, and they are the idols, to intercede for them. شفعاء وكانوا, and they will deny their associate gods, meaning they will like declare themselves free of them.
Yeah, disassociate. متبرئين, declare themselves free. So وَكَانُوا بِشُرَكَائِهِمْ كَافِرِينَ, and they themselves will reject their partners, or they will deny their associate gods.
ويوم تقوم الساعة, and on the day the hour will arrive, and يومئذ is to emphasize, the people will then be split into two groups, meaning the believers and the disbelievers. As for those who believed and did good, they will be rejoicing in a garden, like they will be happy. And as for those who disbelieved and rejected our verses, the Quran and the meeting of the hereafter, of resurrection and other than that, they will be brought for punishment. فسبحان الله أي سبحوا الله بمعنى صلوا حين تمسون أي تدخلون في المساء وفيه صلاتان المغرب والعشاء وحين تصبحون تدخلون في الصباح وفيه صلاة الصبح وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض اعتراض ومعناه يحمده أهلهما وعشيا عطف على حين وفيه صلاة العصر وحين تظهرون تدخلون في الظهيرة وفيه صلاة الظهر يخرج الحي من الميت كالإنسان من النطفة والطائر من البيضة ويخرج الميت النطفة والبيضة من الحي ويحيي الأرض بالنبات بعد موتها أي يبثها وكذلك الإخراج تخرجون من القبور بالبناء
أن يبسيها بعد موتها أن يبسيها.
أوكي. من القبور بالبناء للفاعل والمفعول. So glorify Allah, meaning praise Him in the evening, meaning when you enter into the evening, and in that is 2 prayers, Maghrib and Isha, and in the morning when you enter into the morning, and it is the morning prayer. And all praise is for Him in the heavens and the earth. اعتراض.
So this is the Jumla Mu'tarida, right? The parenthetical statement. So فَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ حِينَ تُمْسُونَ وَحِينَ تُصْبِحُونَ is one ayah, right? Because it talks about salah, right? And this phrase وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ اعتراض is a parenthetical statement, is a jumla mu'tarida. And what it means is يحمده. My voice is still gone. So يحمده أهلهما, that the inhabitants of the heavens and the earth praise Him. Because if you were to look at both ayat without وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, it just talks about the times of the salah. فَسُبْحَانَ اللَّهِ حِينَ تُمْسُونَ وَحِينَ تُصْبِحُونَ وَعَشِيًّا وَحِينَ تُظْهِرُونَ. So all 4 salahs are basically, all 4 timings are together. So وَلَهُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ is considered to be like a parenthetical statement, an extra statement between.
وعشيا, as well as in the afternoon, and عشيا is عطف on حين, and it is the Asr prayer, وحين تظهرون, and at night when you enter into the afternoon.
تظهرون is not night, تظهرون is at noon. So the way the times are translated, حين تمسون in the evening, right? Which is Maghrib and Isha, وحين تصبحون, and in the morning, which is Fajr, and وعشيا, as well as in the afternoon, which has Asr, وحين تظهرون, and at noon, or midday, right? Which basically has ظهر, right? تدخلون في الظهيرة, which enters in midday وفيه صلاة الظهر. So if you had to take out the جملة معترضة and do the عطف, then it's فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وحين عشيا وحين تظهرون. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So عشيا does not have حين repeated before it because of وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض that comes in. Therefore عشيا is simply عطف on the حين of حين تصبحون.
يخرج الحي من الميت. He brings forth the living from the dead, like the human from the sperm drop and the bird from the egg, and the dead from the living, the sperm drop and the egg, and he gives life to the earth after its death, بالنبات with plants, after like أيبسها, like after it was dry, كذلك, and so you will be brought forth from the grave, and it can be read تخرجون or تخرجون. ومن آياته تعالى,
Whether you will emerge from the grave or you will be taken out of the grave.
ومن آياته تعالى الدالة على قدرته تعالى أن خلقكم من تراب أي أصلكم آدم ثم إذا أنتم بشر من دم ولحم تنتشرون في الأرض. ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا فخلقت حواء من ضلع آدم وسائر النساء من نطف الرجال والنساء لتسكنوا إليها وتألفوها وجعل بينكم جميعا مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك المذكور لآيات لقوم يتفكرون في صنع الله تعالى. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم أي لغاتكم من عربية وعجمية وغيرهما وألوانكم من بياض وسواد وغيرهما وأنتم أولاد رجل واحد وامرأة واحدة إن في ذلك لآيات دلالات على قدرته تعالى للعالمين بفتح اللام وكسرها أي ذوي العقول وأولي العلم. ومن آياته منامكم بالليل والنهار بإرادته تعالى راحة لكم وابتغاؤكم بالنهار من فضله أي تصرفكم في طلب المعيشة بإرادته إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يسمعون سماع تدبر واعتبار. ومن آياته يريكم أي إراءتكم البرق خوفا للمسافر من الصواعق وطمعا للمقيم في المطر وينزل من السماء ماء فيحيي به الأرض بعد موتها أي يبسها بأن تنبت إن في ذلك المذكور لآيات لقوم يعقلون يتدبرون. And from his signs that indicate to his divine ability, the Almighty, is that he created you from dust, meaning your origin, Adam alayhi salam. Then soon you are human beings, made from blood and flesh, spreading over the earth. And among his signs is that he created for you spouses. Hawa was created from the rib
Mhm.
of Adam.
All right, so
Um,
if you look at footnote number 3, the min is tabi'iyya. والأنفس meaning من أنفسكم بمعناه الحقيقي. وقيل, it's also been said that the min ضلعي, the min is ابتدائية, mean it started from there, right? والأنفس, أنفس is not حقيقي but rather مجاز. It's a figurative to mean the entire species, not necessarily just souls or yourselves, right? Like how Allah says, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ, that indeed the messengers came to you from yourselves, right? Not literally, but rather metaphorically, figuratively, meaning from your people, right? So وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا, and from the signs of Allah is that He created you, and He created for you from yourselves spouses. So this from yourselves can be majaz, or it could be haqiqi, it could be literal or metaphorical. Continue.
وسائر النساء, and all of the women from the sperm drops of men and women, so that you may find comfort in them. وتألفوها تألفوها
وَتَأْلِفُوهَا, and to be intimate.
Okay. وجعل بينكم, and He has placed between you compassion and mercy. Surely in this, in what was mentioned, signs for people who reflect in the creation of Allah. And one of His signs.
Yeah. If you look at footnote number 5, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, وَفِي هَذِهِ الْمَوَدَّةِ الْجِمَاعِ وَالرَّحْمَةِ الْوَلَدِ. So why does Allah say, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, right? Why mention both? If you look in books of tafsir, it's always explanations of how both of them are aspects of the marriage, right? That there's a physical component, right? Mawadda, there's a physical component to it. Wa rahma, and there's a emotional component to it, right? Having compassion for one's spouse. And then mawadda, according to Ibn Abbas in footnote number 5, is the intimacy, and rahma is the result of that intimacy, which is walad, which is children. But obviously, if a couple doesn't have children, it doesn't mean that their marriage doesn't have rahmah. That's not the point, right? So if you do take that interpretation, it's not to mean that a childless marriage is devoid of rahmah, right? Like, definitely don't say that. One of our teachers, when we were doing this ayah, mentioned that mawadda is the predominant emotion, or is the predominant aspect of the relationship in the beginning, or in the first half, or in the first phase, or in the younger years, right? That love, understanding, compassion builds up over time. And yes, it is there from day one, but intimacy and relations dominate the beginning, because that's natural. And over time, when mawadda starts to go down because of age, because of life circumstances, right, which is again a natural phase, rahmah starts to become the dominant component, right? That in your, your later years, latter years, old age, even though mawadda is still there, but it's not the more pronounced part of the marriage. It's more of rahmah. Like rahmah is what sustains it in the long run, right? Mawadda at some point is going to stop becoming the dominant driver of a relationship, which in and of itself is not a negative thing, right? Allah created this in anfusikum azwaja litaskunu ilayha, created this entire institution so that mawadda can take place. But naturally over time, once mawadda goes down, what is supposed to sustain and drive the relationship? It's supposed to be rahmah, right? So rahmah, not just children, but rahmah amongst each other. There's an understanding that happens, in a long relationship, right? There's a compassion there. There's a lot of, there's a lot of things that you see that is built on years of compromise, years and decades of understanding, and accepting the other person for who they are. And rahmah doesn't just come overnight, right? It develops over time, and which is why rahmah is mentioned second and mawadda is mentioned first, right? And I'm sure if you go through the books of tafasir, you'll find more specific opinions, but this is kind of the general understanding.
And one of his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the diversity of your languages, of Arabic and foreign languages, and other than that, and the diversity of your colors, in bayad wa sawad, of white and black, and other than that, and you are the children of one man and one woman. Surely in this are signs, proofs over his divine ability, the Almighty. Surely in this are signs for those of sound knowledge. So it can be read عالمين or عالمين, meaning people of intellect and knowledge. And one of his signs is your sleep by day and by night and day, by his will, the Almighty, as rest for you, as well as you're seeking his bounty during the day, meaning your dealings in seeking معيشة, like livelihood. إن في ذلك, surely in this are signs for people who listen. سماع تدبر واعتبار, like contemplating, اعتبار, and taking lesson.
Yeah, سماع تدبر واعتبار, a listening of pondering and taking lesson, right? It's a phrase that will usually come up with something like لقوم يسمعون.
And among his signs is that he shows you lightning, inspiring you with hope, inspiring you with hope and fear. So fear for the traveler from storms, and hope for the resident, so hoping for rain when they hear or see the lightning.
Right, so and from his signs, يريكم البرق, it's translated as he shows you, right, or he displays for you, إراءتكم البرق, lightning, and he shows you lightning خوفا, as a way of scaring. And it is scary for the musafir of storms, because lightning is an indication that rain is coming. And for the traveler who is, who is out of their shelter, it's khawf wa tama'an, and the same lightning is a sign of hope, is shown as hope للمقيم, for the one who is not traveling, because they are safe, they are in their shelter, and they are hopeful of the rain that it is basically indicating.
وينزل, and he sends down rain from the sky, reviving the earth after its death, meaning like its dryness by like growing crops. Surely in this, in what was mentioned, are signs for people who understand and contemplate.
Continue this one, and somebody else can read if they want to. Yeah, you can read the next paragraph also.
ومن آياته أن تقوم السماء والأرض بأمره بإرادته من غير عمد، ثم إذا دعاكم دعوة من الأرض بأن ينفخ إسرافيل في الصور للبعث من القبور إذا أنتم تخرجون منها أحياء، فخروجكم منها بدعوة من آياته تعالى وله من في السماء.
So it would be ينفخ, نفخ ينفخ. أنفخ ينفخ means to make someone go, right? So نفخ ينفخ, because other ayat also say ويوم ينفخ في الصور or ونفخ في الصور, right?
Yeah. وله من في السماوات والأرض ملكا وخلقا وعبيدا كل له قانتون مطيعون وهو الذي يبدأ الخلق للناس ثم يعيده بعد هلاكهم وهو أهون عليه من البدء بالنظر إلى ما عند المخاطبين من أن إعادة الشيء أسهل من ابتدائه وإلا فهما عنده تعالى سواء في السهولة وله المثل الأعلى في السماوات والأرض، أي الصفة العليا وهي أنه لا إله إلا هو وهو العزيز في ملكه الحكيم في خلقه. And one of his signs is that the heavens and the earth persist by his command, by his ability, من غير عمد, without not sure, like without their willing to do it. I don't know.
So translate just the ayah first.
And one of his signs is that the heavens and the earth persist by his command. Then when he calls you out of the earth just once, you will instantly come forth.
So بإرادته بأمره, بإرادته by his will, من غير عمد. So عمد is usually translated as anyone else? Amad is usually translated as
From nothing, like from nothing.
what are the dictionary translations, right? Have a dictionary tab open if you're online. Possible. Right. So Ahmad means, deliberation, right? And there's a willfulness, right?
I have intention or willfulness, Sheikh, in Han's word.
Right. So here, when we talk about the will of Allah, right? Let's see. Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir doesn't have much. So what other word can fit here? Amd is one word. What other word can also this be? So it's not a common jama', but umud. Umud would mean
Is it the pillars?
pillars. Right. Imad comes in the Quran also, right? So bi-iradatihi, the heavens and the earth are at his command, meaning they stand at his will without any pillars. Right? Because if you translate it as amd, which means to be willful, that wouldn't make sense. Continue.
Right. ثم إذا دعاكم, then when he calls you out of the earth, when Israfil blows into the trumpet, للبعث من القبور, to like announce resurrection from the graves, you will instantly come forth that come out of your graves as living. So you're coming forth from the graves by bid'awah, like by a command, is from His signs, the Almighty. And to Him belong all those in the heavens and the earth, of servitude, of kingdom and creation, وعبيدا and servitude, كل له قانتون, all are subject to His will, they all obey His command. And He is the one who originates the creation, then will resurrect it بعد هلاكهم, after they have perished, which is even easier for Him. من البدء, from from beginning the creation, بالنظر إلى ما عند المخاطبين. I'm not sure.
Translate just the ayah.
And He is the one who originates the creation, then will resurrect it, which is even easier for Him. To Him belong the finest attributes in the heavens and the earth, and He is the Almighty, All-Wise.
Right. So when Allah says وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ, right, that it is easier, ahwan is comparison, right? Allah is not saying it is easy on Him. Allah says it is easier on Him. In al-bad'i, from actually originating the creation, resurrection is easier. This phrasing is bin nadri, from the perspective ila ma inda al-mukhatabin. It's from the perspective of who is being addressed, meaning us, where mean anna i'adat al-shay'i, where the repetition of something ashalu min ibtida'ihi is easier min ibtida'ihi from its beginning. Wa illa, otherwise, in reality, فَهُمَا عِنْدَهُ تَعَالَى سَوَاءٌ فِي السَّهُولَةِ. Both of them are equally easy to Allah. Because for Allah to create from the beginning and to resurrect is one and the same. It's not easier, because that would imply one is more difficult, which is not the case for Allah. So وَهُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَيْهِ as a phrase is more so for the mukhatabin to understand that yes, if you do something the first time, then the second time it gets easier, the third time it gets easier. So if Allah could already do something which is literally bring something into existence from nothing, then recreating something from something, or recreating that thing with itself is not difficult, right? That's the objective. Make sense?
Yeah. وَلَهُ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, and to Him belong the finest attributes in the heavens and the earth. الصِّفَةُ الْعُلْيَا, meaning the highest, description.
Well, Sifatul Ulya, basically the highest attributes, right? And if you look at footnote number 1, Sifatul Ulya يعني له الوصف بالوحدانية كذا نقل عن قتادة وقال ابن عباس is أنه ليس كمثله شيء. So مثل الأعلى simply means ليس كمثله شيء. Here, to Him belong the finest attributes. And Mufti Taqi, his is the highest description. So Laysa Kamithlihi Shay is the highest description in the sense that what else can you say after that? Right?
وهي أنه, and that is that there is no God besides him. وهو العزيز, and he is the Almighty in his kingdom, the All-Wise in his creation.
Um, Anybody else want to read? Can read?
I can inshallah.
No?
ضرب جعل لكم أيها المشركون مثلا كائنا من أنفسكم وهو هل لكم مما ملكت أيمانكم أي من مماليككم من شركاء لكم فيما رزقناكم من الأموال وغيرها فأنتم وهم فيه سواء تخافونهم كخيفتكم أنفسكم أي أمثالكم من الأحرار والاستفهام بمعنى نفي المعنى ليس مماليككم شركاء لكم إلى آخره عندكم فكيف تجعلون بعض مماليك
مماليك الله شركاء
الله شركاء له كذلك نفصل الآيات نبي نبينها مثل ذلك تفصيل لقوم يعقلون يتدبرون. Translator continue. بل اتبع الذين ظلموا بالإشراك أهواءهم بغير علم فمن يهدي من أضل الله أي لا هادي له وما لهم من ناصرين مانعين من عذاب الله فأقم يا محمد وجهك للدين حنيفا مائلا إليه أي أخلص دينك لله أنت ومن تبعك فطرة الله
أخلص دينك
أخلص دينك لله أنت ومن تبعك فطرة الله خلقته التي خلق الناس عليها وهي دينه أي زموها لا تبديل لخلق الله لدينه أي لا تبدلوه بأن تشركوا ذلك الدين القيم المستقيم توحيد توحيد الله ولكن أكثر الناس أي كفار مكة لا يعلمون توحيد الله. He has struck, made for them, for you, O the mushrikeen, a similar that is drawn from yourselves, and it is. Do you have among you those whom your right hands own, among your servants from any partners of yourselves, in what we have provided for you of property and so on, so that you and they are equal in therein, uh, fearing them as you fear your own.
So
Um,
ضرب لكم من أنفسكم ضرب لكم مثلا من أنفسكم. Allah gives you an example, meaning O mushrikun, from yourselves, which is هل لكم مما ملكت أيمانكم من شركاء, that would you allow some of your slaves as shuraka, as partners? Would you allow some of your slaves, shuraka, to be partners فيما رزقناكم, in what we have given you, meaning from wealth and other than wealth? In a way, فأنتم فيه سواء, فأنتم فيه سواء, so that you, antum, وهم, and they, fihi, in that wealth, sawa'un, are equal. Right? So Allah is giving an example that you are doing shirk by considering the idols that you worship as sawa, as equal to Allah in His dominion. If you had to do the same, where you considered your slave as a partner in your wealth and considered them and yourselves as equals in it, right? كَخِيفَتِكُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ, so that you fear them like you fear each other, right? So what that means, تَخَافُونَهُمْ كَخِيفَتِكُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ, and so as you fear them, like you fear each other. So Mufti Taqiy's translation is more clear in this. أي أمثالكم من الأحرار, right? Meaning they're like from those who are free. So this is explained further. So to start, استفهام بمعنى النفي. This istifham that Allah has in the ayah, هل لكم, would you consider? This istifham is in the meaning of nafi, that you would not consider. Okay? So al-ma'na, the meaning of the ayah is laysa mamalikukum, right? That your servants, mamalik, your servants, laysa, are not shuraka'an lakum, are partners. Your servants are not your partners. Ila akhirihi indakum, until the end of the ayah, indakum, with you. So if you don't consider your servants your partners, فَكَيْفَ تَجْعَلُونَ, so how can you place بَعْضَ مَمَالِكِ اللَّهِ, some of the slaves of Allah, i.e. the idols, شُرَكَاءً لَهُ, as partners for Him? Does that make sense? So Khattab has a footnote with the translation. The passage says that since humans would not allow those who are inferior to them to become their partners in wealth, how can they set up helpless partners with Allah in His kingdom? Continue.
ذلك الفصل. So how can
كذلك نفصل الآيات.
كذلك نفصل الآيات. So We detail the signs. We explain them in such detail for people who understand or reflect.
Mhm.
So rather, but those who do evil through idolatry, those who follow their own desires without any knowledge, so who will guide um, he so who will guide he who Allah has led astray, um
So, um,
will have none to guide him.
I mentioned this last year. We came across ayat like this, that adaban, we don't say whom Allah has led astray, because Allah doesn't lead his servants astray, because Allah provides guidance. So when you have ayat like Allah, how would you translate it? Whom Allah leaves to stray, because there is a component of free will, right? There's a component of free will, and a person of their own free will, and with all the information that they have to make the right decision, they still choose to go off track. And that's Allah. Allah knows that they're going off track, and Allah lets them go off track. Allah doesn't lead them off track, because that's not what He does, right?
Um so he will have none to guide him, and they have no helpers, protectors against Allah's punishment. So stand, O Muhammad, for religion as a Hanif, as one like inclining to it. Devote your religion, you and whoever follows you, to Allah, purely to Allah, upon which He created mankind.
So, أقم وجهك للدين حنيفا, establish yourself, O Muhammad, meaning your face, solely for the deen of Allah. أخلص دينك, make your religion sincere for Allah. لله أنت ومن تبعك, you and whoever follows you. Right? Okay, and then فطرة الله is a next part.
So and so following upon which he created mankind, and this is his religion, meaning adhere to it. There is no changing God's creation, his religion. So do not change by becoming people who worship idols. That is the upright religion, the belief in God's oneness. However, most people, the disbelievers of Mecca, do not know of the oneness of God. منيبين راجعين إليه تعالى في
So فطرة Allah, it is the nature of Allah, which Allah created people on, what we call the fitrah, وهي دينه, and it is the religion of Allah, And if you look at footnote number 13, وهي دينه وهو التوحيد. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم ما من مولود إلا وهو يولد على الفطرة. Right, the famous hadith that you know of, right? So فقوله على الفطرة أي على العهد الذي أخذه عليهم بقوله تعالى ألست بربكم. So when Allah talks about the على الفطرة, it is indicating to the famous ayah of fitra in Surah A'raf. So أي ألزموها, so adhere to it. لا تبديل لخلق الله. There's no change in the khalq of Allah. There's no change in the creation of Allah, meaning in His deen. So don't change it by doing shirk. That is the straight path. Al-mustaqimu tawheedillah. That is the straight path with the tawheed of Allah, but most people do not know.
منيبين راجعين إليه تعالى فيما أمر به ونهى عنه حال من فاعل أقم وما أريد به أي أقيموا واتقوه خافوا وأقيموا الصلاة ولا تكونوا من المشركين من الذين بدل بدل بإعادة الجاز فرقوا دينهم باختلافهم فيما يعبدونه وكانوا شيعا فرقا في ذلك كل حزب منهم بما لديهم عندهم فرحون مسرورون وفي قراءة فارقوا أي تركوا دينهم الذي أمروا به وإذا مس الناس أي كفار مكة ضر شدة دعوا ربهم منيبين راجعين إليه دون غيره ثم إذا أذاقهم منه رحمة بالمطر فإذا فريق منهم بربهم يشركون ليكفروا بما آتيناهم أريد به التهديد فتمتعوا فسوف تعلمون عاقبة تمتعكم فيه التفات عن تمتعكم تمتعكم فيه التفات عن الغيبة فيه التفات عن الغيبة أم بمعنى همزة الإنكار أنزلنا عليهم سلطانا حجة وكتابا فهو يتكلم تكلم دلالة بما كانوا به يشركون أي يأمرهم بالإشراك لا turning referring to him, exalted is he, with what he has commanded and what he has forbidden. So the word munibina is a hal from
منيبين راجعين إليه, returning to him, or always turning to him in what he has commanded and what he has forbidden. And halun, meaning the word munibina. The word munibina is hal of the fa'il of the word aqim. وَمَا أُرِيدُ بِهِ, and whatever is intended by the word aqim, أي أقيموا. So in the previous ayah, when Allah says aqim wajhaka, that set your face to the faith uprightly, or be steadfast in your faith. Be steadfast in your faith, turning to Allah. Munibina ilayhi. That's the point, right? So munibina is hal of the fa'il of aqim. So set your face to Allah and turn to him in repentance, turning to him in repentance, wattaquhu, and be conscious of him, be fearful of him, wa aqimus salah, and establish the prayer, wala takunu minal mushrikeen, and do not be from the mushrikeen. Minal ladina, from those who, and minal ladina is badal of mushrikeen, right? So when they say alladina is badal, so the ayah doesn't repeat the word mushrikeen. So it's wala takunu minal mushrikeen, and if you had to repeat it, it would be minal mushrikina alladina farraqu dinahum. Does that make sense? So the word mushrikeen doesn't get repeated. So alladina is a badal that refers back to the word mushrikeen, and we know it's a badal bi'i'adatil jar. We know it's a badal because of the repetition of the jar, which is the word min. So minal ladina, the ones who have farraqu dinahum, divided the religion, bi'ikhtilafihim, by their disagreeing, fima ya'budunahu, by their disagreeing of who to worship or what to worship, right? And it says under فيما يعبدونه من الأصنام والكواكب. وكانوا شيعا, and they are groups. The word شيعا is the jama of the word شيعة, which is basically فرقة. So فرقا في ذلك. Right? So not only do they divide the faith, but they also split into groups, and each group, كل حزب منهم, each group is happy, فرحون بما لديهم, with what they have. And another qira'ah, instead of فرقوا دينهم, it's فارقوا, right? فارقوا. So فرقوا, فارق يفارق, فارقوا دينهم. أي تركوا دينهم. In that case, it would mean that they leave their deen, الذي أمروا به, which they had been commanded with. وإذا مس الناس, and when the people are afflicted, touched by hardship, and this is referring to the people of Mecca. So ضر is the fa'il. So when difficulty afflicts the people of Mecca, meaning shiddatun, severity, دعوا ربهم, they call to Allah, munibina, turning, raji'ina, returning, ilayhim, to him, duna ghayrihi, right? And not other than him. Meaning, in times of difficulty, they don't go to their idols, they go to Allah. And ثُمَّ إِذَاقَهُمْ مِنْهُ رَحْمَةٌ, when they are given a taste when Allah gives them a taste of mercy, bil-matar, through rain, then they are suddenly, again, fariqum minhum. They are suddenly a group who do shirk with their Lord. بِرَبِّهِمْ يُشْرِكُونَ لِيَكْفُرُوا بِمَا آتَيْنَاهُمْ, and they become ungrateful for what we have given them. And أُرِيدُ بِهِ التَّهْدِيدِ, and what is intended by that is tahdid, what follows. What is intended by the following is a threat. فَتَمَتَّعُوا, so enjoy yourselves. فَسَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ, soon you will know. عَاقِبَةَ تَمَتُّعِكُمْ, or تَمَتِّعُكُم, right? So soon you will know the result of your enjoyment. فِيهِ الْتِفَاتٌ عَنِ الْغَيْبَةِ, there is a switch from the third person to the second person. فَتَمَتَّعُوا is third person. فَسَوْفَ تَعْلَمُونَ is second person. أنزلنا, and بمعنى همزة الإنكار. So have we sent down to them? Have we sent down to them sultanan, an authority, حجة وكتابا, a proof or book? In other words, we have not sent upon them. We have not sent upon them any proof and book. فهو يتكلم, which speaks, تكلم دلالة, which speaks and indicates, it is a speaking that basically instructs, right? If you look at footnote number 9, فمعنى يتكلم يدل على سبيل الاستعارة المصرحة أو I have to look this word up, but basically means kinaya, right? So do they have a proof or a book that came down on them and is telling them either clearly or implicitly, are they being instructed to do shirk? Okay, so the translation of the entire ayah is it that we have sent down to them any authority that speaks to them about their associating partners with him, about their associating partners with Allah. بما كانوا به يشركون, because of which they do shirk. أي يأمرهم بالإشراك, that which commands them to do shirk. لا. Right? So the la is just the jawab of this hypothetical question, which is not really a question because it's in the meaning of inkar, that we haven't set down any book, hujjah, that instructs them to commit shirk as they are doing. Right. So, okay. So 10:56. Let's take a couple of minutes and then we'll do a little bit of Fidat al-Nahu. Right, let's see. All right, let's continue. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so we stopped on page 16. As I mentioned, when I started the book, in the first week, that we're going to go through the ibarah mainly, understand as much as possible through the text, and then whatever we read in class, you will go through the footnotes on your own outside of class. And sometimes in class, we'll go through the footnotes, especially when there are some details that need to be discussed, right? So we're continuing from Haddul Fi'li. This is the definition of fi'l. وحد الفعل كلمة تدل على معنى في نفسها. And the definition of fi'l is that it is a word that indicates upon a meaning في نفسها, in and of itself. In and of itself. دلالة مقترنة, and it is an indication that is connected to بزمان ذلك المعنى, that is connected to a time of that meaning. المثال للفعل, and the examples of a verb is ضرب يضرب and اضرب, right? So what we did in التحفة last year, right? Very similar. وعلامته, and the signs of a fi'l أن يصح الإخبار به لا عنه, right? So again, a very quick recap. إخبار به, إخبار عنه came up last time when we were talking about ism. The definitions are on page 14. The first table is إخبار عنه and إخبار به. إخبار عنه is the word regarding which you are giving the news, and إخبار به is the word with which you give the news, right? So an ism can be both إخبار عنه and إخبار به, but a fi'l is only إخبار به لا عنه. Okay? In other words, a fi'l is used to give a news, but you don't give news about the fi'l. Does that make sense? So when we say أن يصح الإخبار به لا عنه, that's what we mean. So when you say فعل زيد, then you are giving news through the word فعل. But if you had to reverse it, for example, then it wouldn't make sense, or you want to be able to, do the opposite with the word فعل that you can do with زيد قائم versus قام زيد. Does that make sense? Right. So it's a very technical thing that they bring up, that a fi'l does not have all of the capacities of an ism, right? As simple as that. If you look at footnote number 19, it mentions in more detail that ism basically has the ikhbar, bihi and anhu, and the fi'l basically just has ikhbar bihi, but not ikhbar anhu. And ikhbar bihi and anhu is the specialty of nouns, and ikhbar bihi la anhu, only one of them, is the specialty of af'al. Okay. When you read through the footnotes, some more examples are given as well. Other signs of the fi'l, وَدُخُولُ قَدْ وَالسِّين وَسَوْفَ. So having qad, seen, and sawfa before a verb is a sign of a verb. وَالْجَزْمُ, having a sukoon, is a sign of a verb, because if you remember from Tuhfa, we're going to refer to Tuhfa a lot, right? If you remember the way the i'rabs were divided, right? Ism basically has fatha and dhamma, and the fi'l also has fatha and dhamma. And then when it comes to jar, that is specifically with ism, and when it comes to jazm, that is specifically with fi'l, right? So this again came up. So wal jazmu, so a word having sukoon on it is a sign of a fi'l. What tasrifu, and it conjugating, right? And it conjugating ila al-madi wal-mudari, to the madi and the mudari, wa kawnuhu, and then it being amr aw nahi, amran aw nahyan, because the mudari form is the one that changes to amr and nahi. Wa ittisalu ad-dama'ir al-barizati al-marfu'ati, and then having a damir marfu'a bariza, right, attached at the end of a word like darabtu. Darabtu is the sign of a fi'l, and having ta'if ta'nith sakina, having the ta'nith with a sukoon like darabat is also the sign of a fi'l, wa noonayit ta'kid, and the two noons of ta'kid. So whether it's khafifa or thaqila, whether it's the noon with the shadda or the noon with the sukoon, both of them are the signs of a fi'l. فَإِنَّ كُلَّ هَذِهِ مِنْ خَوَاصِ الْفِعْلِ. All of these are from the khasiyah, all of these are from the characteristics of a verb. Following so far? It's self-explanatory, I mean, came up in Tuhfa. وَمَعْنَى الْإِخْبَارِ بِهِ, so إخبار به is being defined again. أَنْ يَكُونَ مَحْكُومًا بِهِ. So إخبار به is defined as mahkum bihi. Mahkum bihi simply means something through which you can give the hukm. Okay? Something through which you can give the hukm. So if you look at footnote number 23, it mentions mahkum alay, right, which is ikhbar anhu, which comes in the ism. So to mention some other things about jumla inshaiya and things like that, it'll come up, so don't worry about it now. But the definition of mahkum bihi, ikhbar bihi are one and the same. Mahkum alay and ikhbar anhu is one and the same. Okay. وجه التسمية للفعل. Why is a fi'l called a fi'l? ويسمى فعلا باسم أصله وهو المصدر. And a fi'l is named with the name باسم أصله, with the name of its original form, وهو المصدر, which is a masdar. لأن المصدر هو فعل الفاعل حقيقة. Because the masdar is the action of the fa'il in reality. So when you say nasara yansuru nasran, to help. So when somebody is nasara, when somebody helped, or when somebody is nasir, what they have done is nasr. What they have done is helped, right? So when you say fi'l, the verb is called a fi'l because that's the original action of the doer, right? Whatever it is, whether it's help or hit or whatever it is, the masdar form is showing the actual original action of the doer, of the fa'il. Okay, so that defines ism fa'il. And now harf. وَحَدُّ الْحَرْفِ كَلِمَةً, and the definition of harf is that it is a word لا تدل على معنى في نفسها, that does not indicate to a meaning in and of itself, بل تدل على معنى في غيرها, but indicates to a meaning other than itself. In other words, in order for it to make sense, it has to be connected to something else. المثال للحرف, and the examples of harf, نحو, like min. فإن معناها الابتداء. The meaning of min is al-ibtida, the starting point. وهي لا تدل عليه, and min does not indicate upon this meaning of ibtida إلا بعد ذكر ما منه الابتداء, except mentioning after it where the ibtida is from. So if you just say min, from, that doesn't make sense. But if you mention where it's actually starting from after min, then it'll make sense. That's the function of harf. Harf doesn't make sense otherwise. So for example, Basra wal Kufa, مثلا تقول سرت من البصرة إلى الكوفة. That I traveled from Basra to Kufa. So if you just said sirtu min, that wouldn't make sense. Because where did you actually start from? So after min, the starting point has to be mentioned in order for the min to have the meaning of ibtida. That's what it means, that it's not fi nafsiha, but rather fi ghayriha. The meaning of ibtida will only come when it is connected to where the ibtida actually is coming from. Alamatul harf, and the signs of the harf, وعلامته ألا يصح الإخبار عنه ولا به. So ism is إخبار به and إخبار عنه. Fi'l is only إخبار به and not إخبار عنه. And the harf is neither إخبار به, neither إخبار عنه. Does that make sense? Right? وألا يقبل, and it does not accept the signs of the asma nor the signs of the af'al. So any of the signs of asma and the signs of the af'al are not going to appear in harf. Following so far? So what's the purpose of harf? If the harf cannot be used for ikhbar bihi or ikhbar anhu, what's the purpose of it? And that's mentioned in the next couple of lines. Fawaidul harf. The benefit of the huruf, I mentioned this in our first class. The entirety of the book is going to have these parentheses, sentences that are basically put in by the translator of the book, because it breaks down the original text. Otherwise, the original text is much shorter. So fawaidul harf, the benefit of harf, وَلِلْحَرْفِ فِي كَلَامِ الْعَرَبِ فَوَائِدٌ, and for the harf in the Arabic language is a couple of benefits. كَالرَّبْطِ بَيْنَ الْإِسْمَيْنِ نَحْوُ زَيْدٌ فِي الدَّارِ, like connecting between two nouns. In the example, زَيْدٌ فِي الدَّارِ. أَوِ الْفِعْلَيْنِ نَحْوُ أُرِيدُ أَن تَضْرِبَ. Harf can also combine between two verbs like أُرِيدُ and تَضْرِبَ. أو اسم وفعل. It can also connect between a noun and a verb, like ضربت بالخشبة. I hit with a wood or a plank or a stick. So it connects the two. أو الجملتين, or it can even connect between two sentences. إن جاءني زيد أكرمته. So the in is the harf, that's the connector, even though it literally doesn't come in the middle of the sentence. But in the meaning, we know that in ja'ani zaydun is the first part, akramtuhu is the second part. And we know that because of the word in. وَغَيْرَ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْفَوَائِدِ, and other than that, of the benefits, التي تعرفها, which you will come to know في القسم الثالث, in the third part of the book, في بحث الحرف إن شاء الله تعالى. And more will be mentioned in the last part of the book. Okay. وجه التسمية للحرف, this came up in تحفة as well. ويسمى حرفا, it is called harf or named harf لوقوعه في الكلام حرفا, because of its occurring in the sentence on the side. حرفا أي طرفا, because of it occurring on the side, even though literally it doesn't have to come like in the beginning or at the end of the sentence, right? But in terms of meaning, right, the nouns and the verbs are given priority before you look at the harf. Why? إِذْ لَيْسَ مَقْصُودًا بِالذَّاتِ, because the harf in a sentence is not the purpose of the sentence in and of itself. Make sense? So Zaydun fi dari, fi is not the main part of the sentence. Zayd and ad-dar and then fi. And then combined you get the meaning. Does that make sense? So because it's pushed to the side, it's called harf, which basically means tarf, which means side. Right? Mithlul musnad wal musnad ilay. Musnad and musnad ilay. Now, musnad and musnad ilay is simply another term for ikhbar bihi and ikhbar alay or ikhbar anhu. Look at the table at the bottom of page 20. Ikhbar anhu is the same as mahkum alay, is the same as musnad ilay. Make sense? All three of these things are basically just describing the same thing. And ikhbar bihi, mahkum bihi, and the musnad is explaining and describing one and the same thing. So look at the words under the three terms. Ikhbar anhu, mahkum alay, and musnad ilay is Zaydun. Ikhbar bihi, mahkum bihi, musnad is qa'im. Zaydun qa'im. In other words, all of the ones on the right can be just called the mubtada, right? And all of the ones on the left can just be called the khabar. But you're going into intermediate / advanced book of Nahu, so they're going to introduce terminology that describes the function. So mubtada is just the label that's given to the first part of Jumla Ismiya. Khabar is the label that's given to the second part of the Jumla Ismiya. And in the word itself, you get some idea of what they're doing, of what their function is, right? So mubtada is what you're starting off with, and khabar is the information, so to speak, right? But if you had to like broaden the definition, ikhbar anhu and ikhbar bihi, mahkum alayh is basically explaining the various aspects of a mubtada and khabar. Making sense? So don't worry about, all these new terms. They simply just mean mubtada and khabar. Okay, so that is the part of kalima, and kalima is of three types: ism, fi'l, harf, ta'riful kalam. And this is now the definition of kalam. And faslun thalithun fil muqaddimah. This is the third fasl in the introduction, in the muqaddimah. Al-kalamu lafdun tudummina kalimatayn bil-isnad. Kalam, a sentence, basically are words, or basically is when two words are combined bil-isnad with a connector. So for example, Zaydun fi dari, Zayd and dar are two words that are connected to each other by the word fi. Does that make sense? So when two words have an isnad put together, then we have what we call kalam. Or if you say Zaydun qa'imun, it's two words, but what is connecting them both? What's connecting them both is basically one is mubtada and one is khabar. That's the isnad. Okay? And isnad is defined as وَالْإِسْنَادُ نِسْبَةُ إِحْدَى الْكَلِمَتَيْنِ. The isnad is the connection of one of the two words إِلَى الْأُخْرَى to the second بِحَيْثُ تُفِيدُ الْمُخَاطَبِ, in a way that benefits the addressed person. فَائِدَةً تَامَّةً, a complete benefit. يَصِحُ السُّكُوتُ عَلَيْهَا, whereby it is appropriate to be quiet. Example, Zaydun qa'imun and qama Zaydun. We did this in Tuhfa, right? That kalam is basically something that gives complete benefit, right? So when somebody says qama Zaydun, that gives complete information about the sentence. All right, that's yasihu sukut. So the person in Tuhfa, and I remember because we just did it with year 3, when we say yasihu sukut, when we say that the one speaking can remain quiet, it simply means that the person who is listening to you is not waiting or is not left waiting for more information. So if you were to say qama, then your question would be, well, who stood? So you would say qama zaydun. So that's a complete sentence. Make sense? We're not talking about follow-up questions. Because if you say qama zaydun, then they could say, why did Zayd stand up? Or when did he stand up? Or where did he stand up? Those are all follow-up questions. You don't have to include all of that in the first sentence, right? So as long as it's complete benefit and the listener understands what you're trying to say and it's appropriate for you to stop talking, then that's called fa'idatan tamma. And another word for kalam, ismun akhar lil kalam wa yusamma al kalam jumlatan. Kalam is also known as a jumla, is also known as a sentence. So if you have one word, it's kalima. If you have more than one word, it's called kalam. In other words, now it's a string of words put together. Okay. Page 22 is the last page of the muqaddimah, so we'll just do it quickly. And again, nothing new because Tuhfa mentioned this as well. Aqsamul kalam, and now the types of jumla, the types of sentences. For ulima, so it is known أن الكلام, that kalam لا يحصل إلا, is not attained except min ismain. It's not attained except by two nouns. نحو زيد قائم ويسمى جملة اسمية. So when you have two nouns, it's called the jumla ismiya. أو من فعل واسم, or through a fi'l and an ism. نحو قام زيد. Right? ويسمى جملة فعلية, in which case it is named a jumla فعلية. إذ لا يوجد المسند والمسند إليه معا في غيرهما ولا بد للكلام منهما. So إذ لا يوجد المسند والمسند إليه. So musnad and musnad ilay, meaning the mubtada, khabar, fi'l, fa'il, right, is not found ma'an, together, fi ghayrihima, in other than these two forms, in other than these two jumlas. So when you say jumla ismiya and jumla fi'liya, what you're trying to say is that the way the information are presented, by having an ikhbar bihi and ikhbar anhu, or having a musnad and musnad ilay by having a mubtada and khabar and a fi'l fa'il, you do not get this makeup in any other type of sentence, fi ghayrihima. Does that make sense? So musnad ilay, ikhbar and ikhbar bihi only come in a jumla ismiya and a jumla fi'liya. And the reason why they're mentioning it here is because there are other types of jumla as well, right? Like jumla insha'iyya, for example, right? Other types of sentences that aren't ismiya or fi'liya, and they're considered separate. وَلَا بُدَّ لِلْكَلَامِ مِنْهُمَا, and it is necessary for kalam to be one of these two types of sentences. Okay? So this last bit, as-su'al wal-jawab, is basically a preemptive question and answer that's given that somebody might have when they consider the definition of jumla, right? And this was in the muqaddimah of Tuhfa as well. فَإِنْ قِيلَ, so if it is said قَدْ نُوقِضَ بِالنِّدَاءِ, that it has been broken bin-nida. What has been broken bin-nida? The claim that was made on the previous line, that musnad and musnad ilay is not found in any other sentence other than jumla ismiya and fi'liya. That's the claim, right? The claim was that musnad and musnad ilay are only found together in either a jumla fi'liya or a jumla ismiya. So the author preemptively gives this question, that if somebody was to say that your claim is broken by nida, by a phrase of nida like Ya Zayd. Ya Zayd is considered a complete sentence. And why would you consider that a complete sentence when Ya is a harf nida and Zayd is the munada? Are you following? If you say that Ya is harf nida and Zayd is munada, well, which one is the musnad and which one is the musnad ilay? But we consider this a complete sentence. So qulna, he says, the answer to that is the harfun nida'i qa'imun maqama ad'u. That in reality, in this type of sentence, the harf nida is standing in the place of ad'u. Right? We talked about this in Tuhfa, that the harfun nida are short because they are usually urgent. So you shorten it by not mentioning the entire verb. So it stands in place of a verb. And when it stands in place of a verb, then it's basically a musnad and musnad ilay anyway. So فَلَا نَقَضَ عَلَيْهِ. So there's no contradiction between what we said and what the sentence of nida says. So when you say Ya Zayd, you're basically saying ad'u Zayd or atlubu Zayd. Does that make sense? Even though the form is different. وَإِذَا فَرَغْنَا مِنَ الْمُقَدِّمَةِ. When we have finished the muqaddimah, فَلْنَشْرَعُ فِي الْأَقْسَامِ الثَّلَاثَةِ. We're going to get started on the 3 chapters. Wallahu al-muwaffiq wal-mu'in. Right? So, al-qism al-awwal is the first chapter, and then there's obviously al-qism al-thani, which is fi'l, al-qism al-thalith fil-harf, and then that's the end of the book. Right? So, the vast majority of the book will go through this a little bit on Wednesday. Vast majority of the book is on asma, because that has a lot of details. And the fi'l section in this book is actually not extensive, but it's much more than what we did in Tuhfa last year. Tuhfa had like maybe a couple of pages for fi'l and like 2.5 pages for harf, right? Here, the harf section and the fi'l section are substantial, right? But ism is the most, right? Tomorrow, classes from 7:30 to 10. We end up usually doing at least 2 hours, and I mentioned this previously that Tuesdays will only do Jalalain. So Hidayatul Nahw and Jalalain will be on Monday and Wednesdays, and Tuesdays will take advantage of the longer period, and we're just going to do Jalalain. So kind of prep accordingly, right? So try to come up with the schedule, inshallah. Any questions? Right, Jazakallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you.
Alaikum salam.